My name is Fernando Benavides. This is for CPMT 2433 computer integration, and this is my video for my Raspberry Pi project. First of all, I'm going to start by showing you guys the PowerPoint and just very briefly go over some of the steps that I had to go through to complete this project. So you want to come a little closer? So here we begin. This is Raspberry Pi project, Fernando Benavides, and class semester 2020. So here we talk about popular Raspberry Pi operating systems. Noobs, when you first purchase a Raspberry Pi, it typically comes bundled with a micro SD card. Basic out of the box software. It's not so much an OS as it is a collection of operating systems that you can choose to install yourself. It's among the more popular ones. And then we have Raspbian, which is what we'll be working with. That now it's called Raspberry OS, Pi OS in some cases, and it's a Debian engineered, and it's been optimized for Raspberry Pi users. There's two versions of it. The one we're working with in this particular project is called Buster Lite, which is headless Linux operating system. And the way I'll be connecting to it is with Secure Shell over port 22. Basically what it means in headless is that there is no graphical user interface. Open Source Media Center. This is OSM is the one primarily used when a lot of people use their Raspberry Pi. Here's your Raspberry Pi right here. A lot of people use it to run Kodi, which basically if you own a collection of movies, music, you can actually host it online and connect to it. I have a similar setup on my Fire Sticks around the house. And then I mentioned there's another operating system. It's fairly new called RISC. This operating system is neither based in Linux or Windows operating systems, but it's not necessarily one or the other. It's neither, and that's what makes it a little challenging for people to master, obviously, because it's a work in progress. But it does have constant development, and I'm actually looking forward to installing it later on this bad boy. Okay, so here we start discussing the phases of this project. This is phase one. Obviously, we want to set up our Raspberry Pi, configure it, specifically with a static IP address. Do a little bit of the project research the applications, the goal that we have in mind, which in this scenario is to set up a web server, which hosts a online web gallery where we can transmit images back and forth. And of course, advanced planning and preparation. You can't just jump into it like that. You have to make sure you have everything you need. And there we have. If you've seen this before, this is the logo for Raspberry Pi. And this is the steps that I'm taking. In phase two, we install and configure BusyBox. BusyBox is pretty much a jack of all trades. It's known as the Swiss Army knife of software because it's a self-contained application that runs multiple features. And of course, I had to research the HTTP daemon and how exactly it operates within BusyBox. And then of course, configure the HTTP daemon on BusyBox. In order to test, we had to create an index.html file, which can also be called a home.html file. Basically, it's your home page. And here we have, afterwards, we needed to integrate PHP. PHP is it's a language script that primarily used to enhance HTML-based web pages. And we had to come up with a test script as well, so we could test that down the line. Now, kind of explain a little bit as we go. We had to do some research on how to get this particular package running on BusyBox, and because when you install this package at first, it installs it to the main system. A lot of people they usually take the alternative route. Instead of using BusyBox, the traditional route is to install Apache web server, which functions the same, but it has a lot more functions, and it's a lot more compatible with a lot of these things. We are not doing this in this scenario. We're going to be running through BusyBox. Project Phase 4, we will be working with the single file PHP gallery, which is open source software that runs basically off a PHP script. It's highly configurable. There's a lot of options. You can add passwords. You can make it do this. You can select your own thumbnails. It's pretty basic in what it's supposed to do, but it's got a lot of features. And then we're going to be configuring single file PHP gallery, and we'll be executing it on in this particular case on an external browser, which is going to be the one from my home desktop, which is right here. Pipe Project Phase 5, we have to install and configure WinSCP software. WinSCP software works similar to PuTTY, which I didn't mention before, but PuTTY is how we connect with Secure Shell. Basically, it establishes an encrypted connection to the device, and it's basically just a file explorer. I'll show you how it works in a little bit, and we'll show this in action. Research Windows SCP. Okay, well, before we can do any of this installation, we do have to make sure that we have done our background work on these particular aspects of this project, and of course execute WinSCP on external device, which we'll be using on a Windows computer. By Project Phase 6, we had to tidy up our original landing page, which was pretty basic at first. It was just an HTML page that said, "Hey, this is Fernando's Raspberry Pi." There was nothing about it, just black text with a white background. Nothing special. And towards the end, I found time. I experimented with styling and backgrounds and implementing my own images to get a more customized homepage. I also added hyperlinks to the gallery and a little extra that I will show you as we go along. So here we have the hardware components for the Raspberry Pi project. Here you can see the Raspberry Pi, and we had to use an SD card to USB adapter. Some of you might not need to do that because a lot of computers nowadays have an SD card integrated. The majority of the time, though, that SD card is limited to a regular size SD card, not micro. So you might end up needing to use an adapter regardless. Of course, we need our Raspberry Pi because this is where we'll be working. We need a stable internet connection. In my case, my Raspberry Pi came with an Ethernet port, so I decided to go the Ethernet route. And then the micro SD card, which usually comes packaged with when you buy it, but any micro SD card will work. And of course, our power supply. The software components that we use in this project were the Balena Etcher. This Balena Etcher software is used to flash the operating system. The HTTP daemon, which we didn't necessarily have to download because it is included in BusyBox, but had this been done the other way, it would have. The HTTP daemon is also known as Apache. It's not entirely the same thing, but the objective is the same. We had WinSCP, like I mentioned before, it's a file explorer. The operating system we chose, Raspbian Buster Lite, single file PHP gallery, which is that script will be running, and PHP version 7.3. At this point, that's the newest version that runs on this particular model on the Raspberry Pi. So that's the one we'll be using. So here I went ahead and showed a couple of the steps of what I had to do to get this ready. When I will be plugging this, I will be showing showing it, but this is that we'll be demonstrating the completed project and not the steps I took to get here. So I'll go real quick through this. I plugged in the SD card, I formatted it, and I proceeded to flash Raspbian Buster Lite as seen in here. This is Balena Etcher in action. And then the next step is plugging in my Pi, which I'll be doing right now. I'm gonna go ahead and set this up. I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in. Plug it into the Ethernet as well, and we'll come back to that. Give a little time to boot up while we go through this. And then we added a network configuration connection, and we set up a configuration file for SSH via PuTTY. The way I was able to set a static IP address, once I connected to the landline, I went into my home router and I looked for the device, and then I reserved the IP address through my home router table. That's how I was able to set it up at first, and eventually I configured it on the Raspberry Pi when I renamed it and made other changes. And here we have, this is the routing table that I used where I created where I reserved the IP address, so it would always pick up the same one. The first step also was to change the root password to something that if somebody picked it up, they wouldn't know how to get into it. And then we also created a working directory. In this scenario, we'll be working with I named it www. I updated all the packages prior to installing BusyBox, making sure that all of my installed packages were up to date. Software, operating system, everything was up to date. And then I went ahead and installed BusyBox. And here we have other configurations for HTTP daemon. Now, once you install BusyBox, you can actually make it run off of any directory as long as you give yourself permissions to that directory you made. So I went ahead and gave myself permissions to the www directory, and I ran the HTTP daemon off of BusyBox within that directory. It was crucial, like I mentioned, that I give myself permissions to the working directory. And before initiating the HTTP daemon, I needed to make sure I had an HTML index file, that static landing page. Here we go. I went ahead and started it up, and this is the original index.html page that I came up with, basically my home page. And like I mentioned before, just plain black text on a white background. It's nothing special, but we know now that it works. Now the challenge here was getting PHP 7.3 to work. Now this particular phase took me a long time. It honestly took me a few days to get it to work. I had to download several packages of PHP. A lot of them come accompanied with Apache. And if you're not sure what you're downloading and you download and installs all those extra packages, they try to override port 80, which is where you will be hosting your HTTP daemon. And then you'll have a conflict. Plus, you'll have a lot of extra stuff that you don't need on that system. And after more than a few attempts to get this particular package working, I ran across a forum that mentioned that I had to use the CGI, which is the graphical version of PHP. And that's the one in order to get a response when I uploaded the page. When I ran the script, I would be able to see some images as opposed to just plain text, which is what I was getting at the beginning. Throughout the process, I also had to create an httpd.configuration file. It's .conf. And I had to within that file, I had to redirect the PHP file to where the CGI portion, the CGI component was installed. And prior to rebooting the Raspberry Pi, I had to make a few modifications to the i9 file. Those were crucial. After the first times I made those changes, I still couldn't get it to work. And finally, I remembered that I had forgotten to uncomment the lines. If you don't uncomment those lines, it's not going to activate. So just the heads up. Then I went ahead and created a test script, which basically just shows you the info about PHP. And here we have it working. If you don't have the graphical version of PHP, you will be shown all this in just plain text. It looks like a command line because that's the way it's designed to run. Okay. Afterwards, I went ahead and downloaded the single file PHP gallery. I extracted the zip file to my desktop, and within that within that zip file, there was a PHP script, which basically just had the whole code for running the single file PHP gallery. I went ahead and copied that code. I created a new file in my directory, in my www directory within my Raspberry Pi, and I copied over the script, and then I went ahead and saved it as sfg.php. And the little research that there is on this particular gallery, it's pretty straightforward. There's not much about it. I'll show you right now how it works. I'll show you a quick image of the configuration file, what kind of options there's there. And here we have the SFG PHP script running. Pretty simple. It's yet to be configured. It's just showing that it's running. And within the configuration, within the actual script, you can activate an administrator option. Which, if you do activate this administrator option, it gives you the button for you to go ahead and delete images, remove stuff, add stuff, and you can actually upload images, which is how I went ahead and uploaded five images. Since then, I did rename the directory. It's no longer called Admin Pictures. I went ahead and renamed it to reflect. I believe it does say Admin Pictures. And here we go. Okay, this right here. Oh, this right here is just an image of the single file PHP gallery actually working. As you can see, it's just a simple image of one of the lab pictures I took as I went through here. Uploading via WinSCP. WinSCP is pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned, I'll show you how it works. There's not really anything to it. You connect to your Pi. You'll see one side shows your desktop. If you've ever copied anything onto a USB, you know how to use it. And here we go. Towards the end, once I had everything I wanted, I needed to add like I mentioned, like it says there in PowerPoint, adding a little flair. Basically, I just wanted to make my web page, my home page in particular, stand out a little bit more. I didn't want it to look so plain. I added styles, backgrounds to the font. I changed the color, and then I decided to implement some links to the particular web pages. And then I added a background. I added one for the PHP info. This was one of my early variations. Like I said, it's nothing very complicated. And the finishing touches, I decided to add an administrator portal. I decided that it wasn't very safe to have the admin option available on the site, that on the link that visitors could access. So what I did is I went ahead and made a copy of the PHP script of the single file gallery, and in the second one I changed the value of admin to true so that the admin was available, and then I added a custom password, and I'll show you how that works. And just to be on the safe side, so you don't mind people going in there to see your page, but you don't want people actually making changes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and see it in action. Prior to launching here, we're going to start a connection to PuTTY. Here I have the configuration already saved. Log in as Pi, username Pi with a password. Oh, there you go. And there we go. And we are within our directory. We're going to go ahead and show the contents of our directory. We change directory to our www, and here we list the contents. Here we have we have the folders that we want, right? We have the sfphpg directory, and then we have the Windows scp directory, which is a new directory that we created. Originally it was called admin photos. No, actually sfphpg is the one that used to be called admin photos, and WinSCP I created as a sticky because prior to adding the administrator access and the other portal, if you know how stickies work, it leaves a trail. And so now we're going to go ahead and see this in action. Click on here, and there you have it. This is the home page for the Raspberry Pi. It says, welcome, you've reached the landing page for Fernando's Pi. Feel free to look around. As we go to the links here, you can see we have the About PHP option, which basically just loads the page that I showed you before. It tells you which version of PHP in case you want to follow up and, you know, maybe install this yourself. And then we have the gallery. One thing I did have to do prior to this that I did not touch base on is I had to install a component to PHP that allowed me to visualize the thumbnails. Otherwise, these folders were blank, and you could see the images, but only until you clicked on them. And I wanted to enable components. I wanted to enable thumbnails to make it look a little bit flashier. So here we have a few photos, and they're very quick to load. Internet speed is really good. That's another variation on my webpage before I finished doing it. And here we have our videos. And then we go back home. And I'm going to show you right now. We're actually going to go back to our home page. And we're going to click on the administrator link. The administrator link basically takes you to a password. If you don't have the password, you are not getting in. And here we have the option to upload. We click on the add. We can click. Let's say we click on this folder, sfphpg. We go to the admin button. Here we have the upload. Choose files, pictures. Yes, I'll put a picture of my previous project. Here we go. Picture of the Arduino. We're going to go ahead and upload it. And there you have it. Just like that. You go ahead and log out. And there you go. Back to that option. Go back to the home page. This time we're going to establish a connection with WinSCP. Let me show you real quick, just so you can see that in this folder, we don't have the image that we will be uploading via WinSCP. These are the images within this folder. This folder is called WinSCP. So we have 5 images in there right now. We go over to WinSCP. We establish our connection. And here are our folders. We open up our directory. And then we can go to, let's see. Let's go to pictures again. Let's do this right here. You know what? Let's do this. Let's upload a picture. Right there. It's okay. And just like that, reload the page, and there you have it. Now this is a bigger image, so it takes a bit to load the thumbnails. After a few times, you'll be able to see it because it has to build them. And that is how you host a web server through BusyBox. Host your own web page on a Raspberry Pi. Thank you.